Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our regular family of seekers. We're reading through the Bhagavad Gita, and we're trying to learn how to live the Bhagavad Gita, right? How to see our lives through the lens of the Bhagavad Gita, right? And with the goal of ultimately transforming our hearts, right? And growing closer to spirit, to source, to God. So that's what we're doing here every Monday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please feel free to join us. You can email me for the links. What is my email address? Seekersquest 108 at gmail.com. Yeah. And join us and be part of our community because we really get each other through it. And it's been such an inspiring year for me, just being here with all of you couple times a week and kind of immersing ourselves in this and then going off and trying to be more mindful of it as we go through our days. It's really made the Gita come alive for me. So thank you all for being here and for sharing your hearts. So today we're going to start, we're in chapter 7, and we're going to start with text 12. We have 3 verses we're going to try to get through today. So we're going to start with text 12. And with that, I will share my screen and oh, actually, maybe we should say the prayers. Does anybody want to say prayers for us today? Kay, do you want to say the prayers for us today?
Prayers.
Yeah. Do you know Om Ganti Mirandasa? Do you know that prayer?
Oh,
No? Okay.
I'll say
Anybody
it.
else? Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Brittany.
Om Jnana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. That's all I've got.
That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. We begin our day, we begin our class with this kind of intention of just thanking our teachers for where we are today, because without them, none of us would be here. And just acknowledging that and expressing gratitude kind of sets the tone for our class. So let's start with text 12. Maria, do you want to read text 12 for us today?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me.
Thank you. So this section, we're coming to the end of this section. Text 12 is the end of this section that we've been in for a couple days, or maybe just one day now. But anyway, it's everything Krishna's been saying so far. So up until now, he's given 14 examples of how he is the essence within things. That's what we talked about last class, if you remember that. He's the taste of water. He's the ability in man, right? So we talked through these different essences, right? Now he's going to zoom out and he's making a broader point here. He's saying that everything in the material world operates under the 3 modes of nature. We talked about the 3 modes of nature a little bit, right? Goodness, passion, ignorance, right? And yet all of it still comes from him. And the important point here is that while Krishna is the essence of everything, he's not limited to those things. Right? So he has his own distinct personality, his own individuality. It's not that Krishna's trapped inside these material qualities. Rather, they exist within him as part of his energy, right? So he's never contained by nature. He transcends it. So if we think about it, like every action, every event in the world unfolds under the influence of these 3 modes of nature, right? Goodness, passion, ignorance. Almost like the rules of a game. That's what we're playing here. This material existence, it's like its own little game. And the key here though is that just as a king isn't bound by the laws he creates, Krishna also stands completely above the modes, even though he empowers them. Right? So that's what it means when we say that he's free from the influence of material qualities he's created. He's fully in charge, he's fully independent, right? And he's unaffected. Even though everything in the world operates through these modes, he's unaffected. So while he pervades everything, we talked about all the he's the taste of water, he's the ability of man, he's Om in the Vedic mantras. We went through 14 of these, right? He's the light of the sun, right? So while he pervades everything and everything exists within him, he's also more than the sum of just these material expressions. And so this is one of the unique and special truths about God, right? He's intimately involved in the creation, yet he's completely above it. It's kind of trippy for our material mind to like conceive of, but this is the amazingness of God, right? It's like he's above it all, even though he is it, right? Even though he is the essence. And this brings us to how often people misunderstand God today. And we can think of this like if you think of a fisherman who's casting a net with 1 inch holes. Okay, this net has 1 inch holes. Anything smaller than those holes simply just slips through, right? And suppose they put their net in the water, they lift it up, and there's no fish that are smaller than an inch, right? And suppose they say, okay, small fish don't exist, right? But this we know, this is really just because their net can't catch them. So they're mistakenly projecting the limitations of their tool onto reality. And this is what happens when people try to understand God using only material systems of knowledge like modern science or our senses, right? Today's science, it's naturalistic, right? It means it looks for natural explanations for natural phenomena, right? It's designed to study the material world. So by its very method, it can't capture anything beyond material, right? Like its net simply has holes too big to catch spiritual reality. And then what do scientists say, or what some scientists say, or what do people say? Oh, well, we can't see him. He doesn't exist. We can't catch him in our net, right? He must not exist. Right? But this verse in the Gita is reminding us that God exists beyond the 3 modes of material nature, which make up everything in the material world. Meaning God is non-material. The material tools of knowledge, right, no matter how advanced, can't fully grasp him. So when someone argues, oh, science hasn't found God, therefore he doesn't exist, they're making the same mistake as the fishermen. They're confusing the limitations of the method with the reality itself. Right? So the absence of evidence in a system designed only for material things doesn't prove the non-existence of a non-material reality. Which doesn't mean that God's unscientific. It just means that modern science, as it's set up today, only studies natural phenomena, right? But if science expands its scope to include the non-material, it will discover that this bhakti yoga path has always offered a spiritual science that's practical, that's experiential, right? That's verifiable. We've all experienced it, right? We've all verified through this process, right? And when you practice sincerely, it gives us direct realization of God, which is something no material method can deliver. So this is kind of a interesting, if you ever come across anybody who's kind of a cynic or, atheistic because you can't prove the existence of God, this is kind of a good argument for them. It's like it's not that God doesn't exist, it's that our material tools are limited. Our material knowledge is limited. But that doesn't even mean that there's not a way to experience the presence of God. It just means that the tools that we're using, the net that we're using, the holes are too big. And we can't catch God that way. So then it leads us to the question, if God is present everywhere, how come we don't always experience him? If he's everywhere, how come we don't always experience him? And this is because we get caught up in the reflection instead of the reality. Like you think about a reflection in a mirror, right? It looks like the real thing, but it's missing the essence, right? The depth, the substance. So in the same way, when the Lord interacts with this material world, his energies expand into matter and spirit, but only as a partial reflection of his full qualities. Right? So the material world it's like a kaleidoscope. And when you look into it, mirrors bend and shape, right? That like the light is it's like in all different kinds of patterns. And this is how these modes of material nature work: goodness, passion, and ignorance. They act like these mirrors that distort our vision. So instead of seeing God as he is, we see like a twisted vision, like you see through that kaleidoscope, a reflection that keeps us distracted and deluded. Right? This is material energy. These are the modes of nature. So that's why Krishna says the whole world is under the influence of these modes. Right? They don't touch him, but they cover our vision. It's like we're like trapped inside like a spider web. It's hard to break free on our own, right? But Krishna says if we take shelter of him, the web of illusion can't bind us, and that's the way out. And we're going to get into that even more and more as we move on here. But here's the beautiful part. Even though matter can cover our spiritual vision, it doesn't mean that God is absent. Right? Matter is still his energy. So if we use it in the wrong way, it will drag us down. Right? But if we use it in the right way, it can actually lift us up. And that's what we do in this process of bhakti. Material energy, when it's connected to God, it transforms back into spiritual energy. Right? So all these modes of nature that are clouding our vision, if we connect it to God, it transforms back into spiritual energy. So God's not lost in matter. He can be experienced as the essence in everything if we know how to approach him. So in this way, it's not about rejecting the world, but it's about using it in the right way so that even that reflection can lead us back to the reality. And that's what the Bhakti Yoga practice tries to teach us to do. Right? Whatever we have, we use in the service of God. We connect it to God somehow. And even if we're still kind of covered by the modes, it starts to kind of break up a little bit. Right? And over time, the more we practice, the more sincerely we practice, by Krishna's mercy, the more that kaleidoscope will kind of calibrate, right? So that it's clear, so that we're seeing God. Do kaleidoscopes even calibrate? Let's imagine this one does. So I was reading this verse in the Gita, and I was reading this book about this verse, and it gave this beautiful poem by this Christian pastor, who turned more into like a spiritual guide and became a little bit critical of institutional religion. His name's Jim Palmer. He wrote this poem. I'm going to read it to you guys. And it talks about how reflections are a cover over reality. So it's kind of juxtaposing the reality and the reflection. The reflection meaning what happens to the reality once the material modes kind of contaminate it, right? And we're looking through this kaleidoscope. What's covering what's real. Okay? So he says the church overtakes the community. Orthodoxy covers love, right? So love's the reality and it becomes orthodox, right? Valuing certainty over wonder. Wonder's the reality and the reflection. And once it's contaminated by the modes, becomes valuing certainty, right? Teaching over conversation. Polished over real. Explanations over empathy. Answers over questions. Membership over friendship. Prayer over action. Services over self-care. Style over substance. Appearance over authenticity. Functionality over beauty. Religion over spirituality. Numbers over faces. Holiness over humanity. Accountability over acceptance. Heaven over earth. Meetings over relationships. Reputation over risk. superiority over humility, charisma over compassion, doctrine over reason, hierarchy over equality. Right? And many of us have been members of, some kind of institution or organization, or maybe we even are now, or see these kinds of downfalls in what we're involved in now. And it doesn't mean that it's bad, right? It just means that naturally some of these beautiful qualities, right? Some of these realities of God get kind of pervertedly reflected, distorted by these material modes. And this is what comes out of the other end. So it's just for us to even kind of be aware of, the difference between the reflection and the reality so that we can even better identify it in our lives. Because, it's easy to look at an institution or an organization, or other people and criticize. But the reality is we're all subjected to these modes, right? We're all vulnerable to these modes. And there is a way to rise above them, which is where we're going next. But it's good to recognize when we're being influenced by them. And I think if we all, even maybe it's even coming to your mind now, recognizing how these modes show up in your daily life, how these realities, how some of these beautiful realities of God get twisted, perverted by that kaleidoscope, what kind of reflections they make. Right? Goodness, passion, ignorance. How do these show up in our daily lives? What are you guys thinking? Can you guys relate to that? Relate to that poem, or do you feel it resonate in your life, or maybe has before? Or even like when we think of the modes, goodness, passion, ignorance, how they show up in your daily lives. Okay. Do you want to share with us, Kay?
Yeah, all that you just said is we can relate to that, but it doesn't come to the mind right away. But hierar hierarchy over equality.
Mm,
So even in the temple or places like that, when somebody gives a huge donation, then of course that person is being seated in the front, or then the people in the back, they're going to think, oh look, uh just because he gave a lot of donation, that's why he's in the front, and just because we don't have that kind of money, we are in the back. That comes in the mind. But at the same time, like you said, we are all into this. So that person who gave a huge donation is going to think, look, I gave so much and they are not even honoring me, or it's like nothing. Am I equal to that? So sometimes, not sometimes, it always is like that. We have to have the hierarchy over equality in certain cases and all that. So it is just the way of living. It's just the part of the game that we are into this. Maya, you call it, or the three modes, you call it, and
yeah.
everything else you said, that there can be an example to show, and we should be okay about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. That was a really nice example. And everything you said is so true, right? It's like what we're trying to do here is not get overtaken by the material energy. So just like you said, like we recognize that hierarchy exists and that's just going to be like a normal part of our society. But we understand on the deeper level that we're actually all equal, right? We're actually
Equal.
all equal because we're all a part of God. And at
Right.
our essence, right, we're a soul and we're all equal.
We are all
And
equal. Yes.
yeah, and that's what we really use to bolster us. That's what we're really connected to. So then on the surface level, when these things are going on, there's hierarchy, or we don't get overly involved either emotionally or mentally, or we see it, and maybe we can even appreciate it for its functional role, like, okay, it's somehow the temple has to make money, and so if encouraging people this way helps the temple to make money so that it can do all this service, okay,
It's
and
okay.
we don't get too wrapped up in it.
Yes.
That's really what it is here. Yeah.
And the
Thank
other
you.
example about the net was also great. And same thing, we go to measure the depth of the ocean. We're going to think, okay, this is the only depth, but we don't know how deep the ocean is because it depends on our ruler.
Yeah, we use that. Yeah, we've used a similar analogy before, trying to measure the depth of the ocean with a ruler. Yeah, we just don't have the proper tools.
Yes.
Yeah, and to think that because we don't have the proper tools, it doesn't exist, it's just such a narrow-minded kind of perspective. And also kind of like egotistical, like we know everything, or we are able to understand everything. Like that's not true on a day-to-day basis, right? How could that be true, like as an overall arching principle, right? Yeah. Thank you. Really
Thank
nice.
you.
Thanks, Kay.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share before we move on to the next verse? I liked this numbers over faces. I liked that one a lot. And there was one about relationship too. Um, it's just the importance of like valuing people as people, and not as like numbers or commodities. Right? Holiness over humanity, meetings over relationships. Yeah, these things is we miss the essence, and when this reality gets distorted. And again, it's good just to recognize it. It's good just to recognize it because we want to make sure that we're tethering ourselves to the reality, right? And that we're not getting overcome or overtaken by the reflection. Meaning we're not investing too much energy, too much worry, too much anxiety in the mere reflection, right? Because just that investment alone is going to derail us from our actual goal, right? From what we're actually trying to do. And it doesn't mean that we ignore its existence, or sometimes we see other people get overly involved in it, and that can bring us down. But at the same time, we have to have a broader perspective, or we're ourselves going to get dismantled from our objective, from our goal. Right? We're gonna go on a detour. So
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? I
yay.
just want to share.
Yeah, Mariah gets to share. Yay.
Um, yeah, I'm just reflecting on it, like how easily we slip into the reflection, right? Or into the modes. And like I mean, everything was kind of said already between you and Kay. It's like we could get so caught up into it. We can have the mindset of like, oh, oh, that person's, they're being honored and I'm not, and I'm poor, this or that, and into these comparisons. Um, and it's just like can be so easy to get caught into that. Or get into like, oh, we need more numbers instead of taking care of the people. I know a lot of people in healthcare, and it's like all about like meeting their metrics now. Otherwise, you're going to get fired. It's not about the care of the patient anymore. Anyways, but it's just like how easily we fall into that, and how easily sometimes we like get so caught up in like, well, I'm not going to be a part of that. That's wrong and that's bad. But it's understanding like that reflection has its place. And I love how you guys brought that up. That reflection has its place. And let's keep reminding ourselves, keep doing the practices that keep us tethered, like you said, to the spirit of things, right? And yeah, it's just maintaining those practices so we can stay as the observer of the reflection and not just be like part of the reflection, right?
Yes.
So that was just some reflections that were coming to me, and I don't know, just having gratitude for this class again, because it's like it's one of the things that helps me not get so caught in that reflection, you know? So
Yes.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. That was so beautifully said, Mariah. It's like, and the other thing, like, do you think about people that are really caught up in these modes? Like, you think about President Trump, right? Like, I think about him because my husband talks about him all the time. Right? But to the degree that we're so caught up, that he's caught up in the mode of ignorance, we become caught up in the modes, just like you said,
Yes.
The-
Yeah.
and it pulls us into the modes. And again, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have discernment, because we absolutely should, but we just have to be careful when even just observing these things pulls us in, like like when the water's going around in an ocean, what's that called, a riptide, or is that what it's called, and
Yeah.
then it drags everything around it in. That's what happens. So we have to even be careful as we're navigating around this material existence, and we're seeing the effects of the modes everywhere. We have to try to kind of stay far away from that riptide, so that we don't get too pulled in.
Hmm.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Maintaining our integrity in our spiritual vision, right? Like
Yeah.
keeping that spiritual vision, that spiritual tether, maintaining that integrity. And it's hard. And like, I know I tend to beat myself up for it, and I have to just be like, okay, I fell into the material mode here. Okay, let's do the practices that help me get back out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and like you said, getting caught into other people, that's the hardest for me, because it's just like I'm very sensitive. I get easily swayed by other people, and I'm like really learning to stand stronger in myself and like maintain my own spiritual integrity and spiritual values, I should say. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if, someone's caught up in the mode of ignorance and they treat you badly or poorly, and the
Right.
first thing you want to do is be right in that mode with them and just,
Yeah.
tell them how it is. And it's like, no, we don't have to be so subjected to the modes just
Right.
because, yeah, we're bumping into it constantly. We can be above it. We really can. And in that way, we're connected, we're joyful, we're steady. That's where we want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That was so nice. Thank you both for those reflections. So yeah, back in verse 7:7, the verse, well, I guess that was a few verses ago now. Krishna used the image of pearls strung on a thread. Remember when we talked about that? The thread runs through the necklace, holding everything together. But but it isn't visible on its own, right? That that's true. But now Krishna's adding something more. He's holding everything together, but he's also existing beyond it, right? Everything rests within him, but he himself is not confined within them. So it's like another dimension that we're going into here. Like, yes, everything we see is Krishna, and he's holding everything together as if pearls on a thread, right? But he's also exists beyond that. It's amazing. It's amazing. Right? So this is setting the stage for what's coming next. Krishna's going to go deeper into what it really means that he's transcendental, and what that implies for us. That's where we're going. Okay, so 7:13, 7:13. If you don't mind, Maria, when you're ready.
Mhm. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who who am above the modes and inexhaustible.
So this is where he's going. This is where he's going. And chapter, or no, text 13, we're starting to enter a new section here, right? Okay, because chapter 7 has 3 sections. The first section is about knowledge about Krishna, that we covered that 1 through 12. Now we're entering into the second section, which is going to talk about how this knowledge of Krishna leads to surrender, right? The people who surrender and people who don't surrender and people who surrender to something other than Krishna. We're going to kind of go into this whole conception of surrender. So in this verse, Krishna's making a really powerful point. He's saying that the whole world is deluded by the 3 modes of nature, right? Goodness, passion, ignorance. And because of that, people don't really know him. They don't recognize that he's actually beyond the modes altogether. They don't even know that something exists beyond that, right? They don't even know that they're subjected by the modes or what the modes are, right? Much more that something's beyond that, right? So that's why we really even kind of try to go into the science of the modes so that we can start to even kind of identify where we are, where our level of consciousness is, so that we have some kind of even metric or like relativity to understand that something exists beyond that, that's transcendental, right? That's inexhaustible, that's beyond time and space, right? If we think of the modes like different pairs of tinted glasses, right? If you're wearing red glasses, everything looks red. Okay, if you're wearing blue glasses, everything looks blue. And this is the way that the three modes of material nature color our perception of life, right? They shape how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and even how we think about God. So this is so trippy for the consciousness, but we're really trying to go in and expand your consciousness here, expand our consciousness so that we understand when we have a blue lens on, when we understand when we have a red lens on, right? And we understand that no matter what color the glasses are, they're still altering reality because the only reality is Krishna. Krishna is the ultimate reality, right? He's completely outside of that. He's not tinted at all. But our vision is covered, and therefore we often misunderstand Krishna or we forget him. Even people in goodness, which is the clearest of the three modes, right, can still be bewildered about Krishna's true position. This is how strong the influence of these modes are. So again, it's not to say anything's good or bad, but we just want to understand what these modes are and how they impact us so that we can start to conceive of a way out. Right? We can start to see them for what they really are. We can start to understand when what we're seeing is actually a reflection and it's not the reality. Because if we mistake it for the reality, right, we become overly infatuated, we become overly involved emotionally, mentally, right? Eventually it's going to pull us down because that's the nature of this twisted reality. Right? So we can all probably think, even as we go about our days, or we just think about yesterday, the different colored glasses that you were wearing at different times. I'm starting to realize how passionate I am because I'm starting to spend more time around people that are a little bit more sattvic. And I see how this mode of passion, even like makes me always feel rushed, makes me always feel hurried. It makes me like more prone to mistakes. And I always have this mindset that like I should be somewhere else, right? Instead of just like being content in the moment. Right? And this is helpful too when when you're around different people and you can even kind of see relatively where you are, or and how you're being shaped. And we can see this in daily life. Someone who's like addicted to alcohol, they might feel like it's their source of happiness, right? They might be in such illusion that they think it's their source of happiness, even though it's really leading to misery. Right? Or a person that's influenced by passion may think, if I just work hard enough, if I achieve enough, then I'll be happy. Right? So like depending on our own consciousness, we can identify, the illusion in these consciousness, right? Depending on the mode, like an alcoholic in the mode of ignorance, right? An overachiever in the mode of passion. Right? These are just material modes that are impacting their consciousness. Right. And if we can see that illusion. We can see that way of thinking is not quite clear. Right? Even someone in goodness, if they feel content or peaceful, they might still be missing the deeper reality, right? That God is beyond all of this. They still might not be yet connecting with God. There's still some kind of form of illusion there. So we see how this works in life, in material shifts, right? We see these different kinds of illusion from ignorance to passion, right? From passion to goodness. But the point here is that as long as we don't recognize Krishna's transcendental position, we'll stay in some form of illusion. Maybe we're not an alcoholic in the mode of ignorance. Maybe we're not an overachiever in the mode of passion. Right? Maybe we're peaceful in the mode of goodness. right? But as long as we're not seeing God's transcendental position, well, we're still in some form of illusion. May not be as much as that alcoholic or as much as that overachiever, right? Or right, but the deeper point here that Krishna is trying to make is that the biggest illusion isn't just about the ups and downs of the world. It's about not seeing him as he truly is. And this is so like trippy for our consciousness, but it's like the ultimate zoom out. We really have to zoom out and broaden our frame of vision, right? Like if you're an overachiever, it might be really easy for you to look down on that alcoholic, right? But the point is to zoom out of that completely. Like look at the whole ladder, right? Look at the whole ladder and look what exists beyond the ladder. That's what's actually happening here. Like you're stuck on the ladder and you're looking at the step below you and you're like, I'm so glad I'm not there anymore, right? No, but look at the destination that's above the ladder, right? That's where we should be looking. We don't need to get so caught up in the small shifts up and down the ladder. We need to look at the destination above the ladder, right? And that's where we're going to next. This is where this final verse is going to bring us that we're going to talk about today. If the modes keep us trapped like this, right? If we're just constantly moving up and down this ladder from ignorance to passion to goodness, up and down this ladder, how do we actually break free? How do we actually get out of that illusion altogether? Right? And that's what Krishna is going to answer in the next verse. Before we move on, does anything resonate with anybody that anybody wants to share? Oh, Katie. Katie, you're like going out a little bit.
Something
Let's see. Keep trying.
quickly, but I'm gonna hear me. Yeah, this is bad.
No, it's good now.
The quick thing is, yeah, this is thank you. This is so helpful about the modes because it makes me think of how it worked. Like often I have a lot of things to do that people can't quite tell, like what's next on my list in my mind. And part of my job is also like to listen and make time for people and what they need to express. And so I feel like that's so helpful to just think about why am I so in the mode of passion and feeling like everything has to be done in a certain time rather than go at a pace where I can stay more true to the way we want to treat people, in terms of giving them more time and having more patience if I feel like someone's being repetitive in what they need to express. So I just found that really tangible, really useful. Thank you.
Yeah. And I feel like this is one of the first like points of like philosophical points that I learned in spiritual life. And it's like a game changer in your material world, right? Is to be able to discern between these different material energies and be able to identify what we're being influenced by and when, so that we can move up the ladder a little bit. And even though it's like a small shift up the ladder, we experience quite a big change, in the level of like connectedness we feel to ourselves and others and peacefulness in the mind. And yeah, it's huge. It was a game changer for me. I think that experiment alone like really helped me build faith in this process and this philosophy. Because like Krishna tells us that he teaches us this about the modes and how all of this works. Then like we're saying, when you really zoom out and see that even above the highest mode, this mode of goodness, when we're content and we're not constantly, like yearning for more and we're settled. When we're in this place, that still is material energy. That's still like the bliss, the connectedness, the joyfulness, the contentment that we feel in that is like tiny compared to what we will experience in these transcendental modes when we're connected with God, the ultimate, right? So it's amazing. It's all the things, that's the practice of bhakti. It'll connect you to source, but it'll also in the meantime like just make your material life better, like happier, right? Like more peaceful. It's amazing. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Katie. Okay, should we move on to our last verse of the day here? Whenever you're ready, Maria.
This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it.
Bam! That's the mic drop. That's like the secret way out, right? Like the cheat code to the game. You know, I used to play those games like on Game Boy and you get like a cheat code and it take you to the next level. Okay, Krishna's giving us this cheat code. Right? So he tells us in the previous verse, right? The world is deluded by these three modes of nature. We're all hanging out on this ladder, this goodness, passion, ignorance. Somewhere we're all situated on this ladder, right? And because of this, people can't truly recognize him, right? When we look, we can't even really look up from the ladder. Right? We can't even really see his transcendental position because we're just so engrossed in everything going on the ladder. Right? And then in verse 14, he goes even deeper. He tells us that this covering, this Maya, that's what we call it, this illusion that we struggle with, it's not random, right? It's not like some dark force outside his control. It actually is his own energy, right? This ladder, it's his own energy. We can think of Maya, we call Maya, it's like illusion. It's part of his design carrying out his will. Now, its purpose, it's not to trap us forever, but its role, it's more like a teacher, right? It's showing us over and over how empty and frustrating life feels when we try to live separately from Krishna. And when that lesson really sinks in, we naturally start to turn back to our real position, our position as his servants, right? His eternal parts. So this Maya, this material energy, this illusion, it's not independent. It's divine. It's powerful. It's very difficult to overcome. But he doesn't leave us without hope, right? He's saying clearly, if you surrender to me, you can easily rise above it. That's the key, right? Not fighting it on our own strength, right? Which is what many of us default to do naturally, right? But leaning into our connection with him. That's how we overcome it, which is so beautiful too, because if anybody else is like me and has tried to fight it on our own strength, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It's full of anxiety. You never feel peaceful, right? But surrendering to him, leaning into our connection with him, that makes it even the process blissful. Right? Okay, so we're gonna unpack it. We're gonna unpack it even more here. So we think of this, we talked about this material energy, how it's covering us. Right? I'm gonna give you another analogy for this. We can think of the sun, the clouds, and us here on Earth. Right? And when the clouds roll in, it might seem like the sun is covered. Right? But we know that the sun itself is never actually hidden. It's just far beyond the clouds. But it's just our view, right? Our view, it's blocked. So if we think like Krishna's like that sun, he's transcendental, he's always shining, he's inexhaustible. Maya, this material energy, it's like the clouds and it blocks our perception, right? But it doesn't actually touch Krishna himself. It's just blocking our perception. And so you might wonder if this material energy, it makes people greedy, it makes people angry, it makes people lustful. Why is it called, why is it divine? Why is it divine? Right? And the answer is that Maya doesn't force us to act. She's just facilitating. She's just providing the setup, the field of options. Right? But our free will determine the path we take. And that is love, isn't it? If there's no free will, there's no love. We all know that, right? Maybe we've been in a relationship where it didn't feel like there was a lot of free will. And it's like, this doesn't feel like love. You can't like tie someone down and say, love me. Right? No, you have to provide options. You have to say, okay, this is the facilities. Like a multiple choice test. The teacher provides all the different options. The teacher also gives you the knowledge to choose correctly, but then they test you and they give you options that aren't right. Right? And if the student chooses wrong, you can't blame the teacher. Right? It's a reflection of the student's choice. And this is how Maya works. It exists to test us, to give us the opportunity to grow and to turn towards Krishna. And Krishna wants us to do that on our own. Because if we don't, what's the value in that? Right? If we're forced, or if there's value in that, in using our free will. We have free will. Right? So Maya, the illusion's purpose is positive, even if the lessons feel difficult. It's not like Maya's a bad thing. Well, Maya's a servant of Krishna. She's facilitating everything here so that we can ultimately turn towards Krishna. And it's important. We have to be tested. It's just like a student has to be tested to make sure that they really understand, to make sure that they're really sincere. We can imagine another analogy here. It's like a loving parent who wants their child to succeed, so they hire a strict tutor. Right? The tutor may seem tough, but the purpose is growth. The parent's love is constant, and the tutor carries it out with discipline. Right? So Krishna's like the parent, and Maya is like the tutor. So her role is to ensure that the only one who truly choose Krishna, who use their free will sincerely, can move forward. Right? So only those who are sincere move forward. And that's all the material energy here. It's just to facilitate that purpose. And we can all think of, times we've been through life's challenges, right? And then we can think of how they're actually teaching us something deeper, even if it was tough at the time. Different times in our lives. I feel passionate now, but I remember times I was so much more passionate. Like when I got into spiritual life, I was so passionate in that mode of passion. And I think of even just like the relationships, that I approached from that perspective and how much I learned from that. So these things are important for us, right? They teach us these deeper principles that help us to turn back towards God. And that's the point of them, right? That's not to say we could also fail the test. You can also always choose the wrong answers, right? And that's naturally will happen. But we have this knowledge, we have this opportunity, right? Let's get sincere. Let's try to choose the right answers so that we can move forward. One devotee once asked Prabhupada, if our purpose is to serve Krishna, why is Maya so strong? Right? Like why doesn't God just make it easy? It's the temptations, right? The impulsions to act in the lower consciousness. Like, why is it so hard? Why is this pull so strong? Right? And Prabhupada answered him. He said, because your purpose is not strong. That's why Maya feels so strong, because your purpose is not strong. Right? That's the key. Temptations only trouble us when our purpose isn't clear, right? When our determination to serve Krishna is steady and unwavering, distractions have little power. Right? When we're more committed to serving Krishna, when somebody cuts us off in traffic, right? Or that jerk talks down to us at work, when we're more committed to serving Krishna than to serving our ego, our response will be different. Right? Our response will be different. When we're committed to serving Krishna, we may acknowledge, that the wrong that they did. It's not that we ignore it, but we don't go after retaliation. We don't get all heated and take it personally. We understand this person is on their own path. They're struggling with their own demons, and we can more easily let it go. And in that way, we can act more out of compassion. Maybe we set up an extra boundary or two so that we don't get distracted in the future. But we let it kind of brush off. When we're serving our ego, when we're more determined to serve our ego than to serve Krishna, we all know where that can lead us. Right? So that's what he's saying here. We have to be so determined to serve Krishna, right? That we can beat Maya. Just like a student who's really serious about school, about their exam. And so they put in the time, they study. Even if they get offered to go to a party, or to play video games all night, whatever it is, if they're really serious, their purpose is strong, they're not gonna be taken away, right? And the difference, it's not in the distractions, it's in the strength of their purpose. So we should be grateful. We should be grateful for Maya, right? It's good to have these temptations. It's good to have these challenges. It's testing us. How strong are we? How sincere are we? How committed are we? Right? And this surrender, this level of surrender is how we cross over Maya. Right? How we take shelter of God is how we cross over Maya. That's what it means to have a strong purpose, taking shelter of God, right? Surrendering to Him. We think of Maya like a guard dog at someone's house. On your own, you can't control it. It's trained to bark, to growl, maybe even to bite. Right? But call the owner and the dog like immediately obeys. And Krishna is the master. When we surrender to him, Maya, his energy, steps aside. The temptations, the illusions, the distractions, they lose their power. Krishna tells his energy, no need to test this devotee anymore. And therefore the person moves beyond Maya. So the point here is that don't fall into this trap where you think that you can fight this by your intelligence alone. No matter how smart you are, how clever you are, how strong you are, how determined you are. Right? Maya, it's not just like some illusion that we can figure out if we're clever enough. It's Krishna's divine energy. And if we try to outthink it, we're going to lose. Eventually. Even if it feels like we're winning, we will lose. And this is why Krishna calls it formidable, even surmountable. He's telling us right now, this is like the cheat sheet. This is how this material energy is designed, and this is your way out of it. It's surrender to me. Don't think that you can get out of it by using your intelligence, by a stronger material energy, right? That's not the answer. You're going to lose if you try that. Right? So once we understand that Maya is Krishna's energy, we see the real solution. It's not about beating the illusion, but it's about redirecting our love, right? Using our intelligence to understand. That's good, right? But transformation really, really only happens in the heart. It doesn't happen in the mind. So when we choose to love and serve Krishna, that's why Bhakti Yoga, the process is serving Krishna, right? We serve, we love. Right? The more I serve my daughter, the more I love my daughter. Isn't it? So we're in the process of falling in love with Krishna. Right? And when we choose to love and serve Krishna, Maya loses her power. So only by surrendering our heart to him can we rise above the illusions and live in our true freedom. So that's the process here. That's what we're doing here. So this last part here that we'll talk about today is what is surrender really? We talk about surrender. It's like we think of all different things. Some of us even have like bad negative connotations with the word surrender. When we think about this verse, there's two parts to it. First, Krishna explains how powerful Maya is, right? So we covered that. It's divine. It's not ordinary illusion. It's divine. And on our own, we can't combat it, right? But the second part, Krishna is introducing us to a power greater than Maya. That's his own power. How do we access that? By surrender, right? By surrender, we rise above. That's the process, right? So what does surrender actually mean? Surrender is not passive, right? It's not about giving up and doing nothing. Surrender is active. A great saint, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describes 6 elements of surrender of the heart, right? 2 of which are accepting what's favorable for Krishna consciousness and letting go of what's unfavorable. Those are huge. If we think of surrender as we go through our days and we think, okay, I want to surrender because I want to overcome this material energy. How do I surrender? These are 2 practical things we can do. Accept what's favorable for Krishna consciousness, let go of what's unfavorable. That means that we're constantly making choices, right? Conscious choices. When we think of Draupadi, many of us know the story of Draupadi. In her moment of crisis, she raised her hands and she called out for Krishna, right? That's surrender. But that's not the only way that surrender looks. We can think about Arjuna too. At the beginning of the Gita, he folds his hands. He bows to Krishna. He says, I'm yours. Please guide me. Right? That's surrender. Right? But later, when he's fighting on the battlefield, he's focused. He's determined. He's shooting arrows. right? That's also surrender. So it's not just about raising our hands, it's about aligning our actions, our will, our choices with Krishna's will. That's the basic principle. When we think about surrender, this is what we should understand. You know, it's harmonizing our will with the divine will. Something that looks like activity, fighting, working, serving. You know, sometimes that's surrender. Other times it's more of an inner submission. You know, letting go, trusting Krishna's plan. However it shows up, it depends on time, place, circumstance. You know, we don't always know what it will look like beforehand, but one thing we can always do is ask ourselves, is this favorable for my Krishna consciousness? Or is it unfavorable? And when we chant, when we do our sadhana regularly, that's surrender. We're surrendering to the process, right? When we choose to avoid a situation we know will tempt us, when we choose to not act out, right, or get swept into this story with this person, right? That's surrender. When our senses are agitated and we resist acting on that impulse, you know, that's surrender. So it takes many forms, but the essence is always the same. Remember this. If you remember anything from this class, remember this. Accept what brings us closer to Krishna, reject what pulls us away. Right? And a lot of this actually happens in the mind. If we entertain thoughts or desires that distance us from Krishna, even unintentionally, that's kind of a rebellion. You know, on the other hand, when we turn our mind towards him, choosing thoughts and desires that nourish our devotion, that's surrender. Okay? So that's in the next verse that we get to, a question may arise, you know, if surrender to Krishna is so powerful, why doesn't everyone do it? And that's exactly what he's going to explain in the next verse. So that's where we're going in the next class. But to bring it back here, you know, in these verses, he's drawing back the curtain on the real workings of the world. It's beautiful, right? We can see it all. He's revealing it all to us. The modes of nature, goodness, passion, ignorance, right? How they shape everything we see, everything we experience, how they keep us bound, unable to recognize him, right? We can't see him as the person behind it all. Left to our own efforts, we just remain caught, right? Caught in this trap, right? Like a fish in a trap, like struggling to get out. But he's not leaving us hopeless. He's making us a promise. He's saying, although his energy is divine and insurmountable, anyone who takes shelter of him can cross over it. That's where we're getting to here. That's the essence of bhakti. Choosing to depend on him rather than our own strength. So these verses invite us to step beyond the illusion of the modes, right? Beyond the endless cycle of striving and struggle, and into a life anchored in surrender, right? Where Krishna carries us to freedom. Right? We don't have to fight anymore. It's beautiful, isn't it? We don't have to fight. We just have to step back, broaden our vision, and ultimately come to our knees. Because if we don't choose to do that, the material world's going to bring us there anyway, right? So that's today's class. I want to hear from you guys. Have any reflections or realizations during today that you'd like to share?
You know,
Hey.
surrender is such a beautiful thing to think about all the time, I think. You know, I mean, we of course we forget and we get into all these temptations, sense gratification, this, that. And today's lecture was, again, it was so nice to, you know, bring ourselves out from these temptations, because God has given us the freedom. And I think the 6 points of surrender, because whenever I started this spiritual journey, I heard about this surrender a lot. And then I was like, what is surrender? What do you mean by surrendering? Then I read about those 6 points somewhere, and then heard about it so many times. And then it feels so good. Of course, it's still not easy. And one of the points is, always think in favor of God, like, and never, the second point is never think against God. I think the third point is to have full faith in God. And then, and the last thing is also surrender the pride of being surrendered. And then think fourth and fifth is something I forgot. So it's so nice, so good to know what is surrender. And, and today's lecture that you said about Maya, that is also his energy. I mean, that is something so about the cloud and the sun that you said, such a good analogy. You know, he is there, and there, this Maya, I mean, we are getting entangled, but then that is also his way of showing that, okay, you want to choose this or you want to choose me.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Thank you so much. Those are really
Thank you.
nice takeaways. I love it when you're here, Kay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Anybody else before we end for the day?
Thanks. Just quickly in sort of other words, my teacher, our teacher Baba, often says, remember the goal. Well, then remember the goal. Remember the goal, which is Krishna and to love and serve Krishna, And I think it was so helpful, like Kay was saying, to hear more of a description of what that love encompasses, all the different types of surrender, all the actions and differences that takes, and also how like a loving relationship is dependent and reciprocal, and it's like, you're giving something to, say, your partner or to Krishna when you are relying on them, and then they can have that service of helping each other. So yeah, for us to say like, oh, it's all I'm going to do it all on my own, like we're not serving Krishna in the way that we could. So yeah, that just kept coming to my mind in the last minutes, the last like 20 minutes when you were speaking, was like, remember the goal, and that's so helpful, and I think that will help us with when we get swept in the modes too. Yeah, it's very cool.
Remember the goal. It's a good tagline for the class. Yeah, because you're going to get swept in the modes. Maybe 2 seconds after you get off this call, you're going to get swept in the modes. Remember the goal. Thank you. That's so good. Thank you. Anybody else before we go here? Okay, well, thank you all for coming and for sharing your hearts and doing the work. This work is not easy. It's not easy and it's never ending. So thanks for going on this journey together.